This is a joint presentation by Amanda Preece and Nicole Leatherman. They both work with the California State Parks, the Monterey District, as environmental scientists. And let's see here, I gotta make sure I get this straight here. Okay, so Amanda has worked a lot at Asilomar and done a lot of work there before she started she's worked a lot at Asilomar. And she does note that her favorite plant is coastal bush lupin, which fit perfectly with the Asilomar dunes, even though it's a nuisance elsewhere. And Nicole has done a lot of work at the Four-Door Dunes State Park. And so as soon as we get their slides up here and see them, we will start the presentation.
Thanks. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Nicole.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us today. We wanted to make sure to start out with a land acknowledgement that the parks that we both get to work on are in the ancestral territory of the indigenous Esalen and Rumsen speaking First Peoples. And despite attempts of cultural erasure, Esalen and Rumsen people persist and thrive, actively preserving their cultural heritage in their homeland and working to restore traditional stewardship. And State Parks acknowledges and honors indigenous peoples' ancestral connection to these lands. And additionally, our California State Parks mission is to provide for the health, inspiration, and education of the people of California by helping to preserve the state's extraordinary biological diversity, protecting its most valued natural and cultural resources, and creating opportunity for high-quality outdoor recreation. That last bit, of course, you guys can recognize is the challenging balance that we always have to work to maintain within state parks. So here's some context for our sites. Monterey Bay and our Monterey district is located within the Monterey Bay area of coastal California. Our county is made up of really varied geography, geology, and climate, giving us over 2,300 recognized taxa of plants, close to a third of all the plants found in California. And there's a number of endemic plants in our county, and this coastal dune ecosystem we're going to talk about is probably one of the most iconic systems in our county. And these are the two respective project sites. Four-Door Dunes State Park, obviously much bigger here in the interior part of Monterey Bay, and the Asilomar Dunes Natural Preserve on the west side of the Monterey Peninsula. So we'll go ahead and start talking about this first site, the Asilomar Dunes Natural Preserve. So this is located in Pacific Grove, California, on that west side of the Monterey Peninsula. It's 25 acres of what was formerly 480 acres of coastal dune habitat on the Monterey Peninsula, historic logging, cattle grazing, sand mining, and of course development into private homes and golf courses damaged and reduced much of this original dune ecosystem. And this Dunes Preserve area became designated as a natural preserve in 2005. So that preserve designation is the most protective subunit classification within our state park system. And it's home to about 250 different plant species, but of course it wasn't always as beautiful as we see in this picture here. So this is a picture from around the 1950s. You can see the historic YWCA, Young Women's Christian Association, historic buildings in the background over here on the left. This is the Owens, Illinois sand mining plant. That's now where the Spanish Bay Golf Course is now located. And of course, our buddy Carpobrodus ice plant all over here throughout the dunes. The sand mining plant was closed in 1965. And of course, ice plant, it was actually planted at this site to try and stabilize the blowing sands, which was starting to blow and engulf those historic buildings on the YWCA property. It required expensive excavation, actually, annually. But when State Parks acquired the Asilomar grounds in 1956, we are at this point where we have these really flattened, degraded dunes, and then it kept getting degraded from visitors crisscrossing the dunes, trampling native plants, and continuing to erode those dunes. So by the 1980s, this whole place is looking pretty sad, and Parks has to really kind of get serious and do some dramatic things. So 1984 is when this very ambitious project to do the restoration in the Asilomar Dunes began. And the goal was to restore the dunes to its pre-European influence. Heavy equipment was actually used there in the dunes as pictured here to reshape the dunes into a proper fore-dune and rear-dune conformation. And they did have some remnant native plant patches you can see in the upper dunes closer to the buildings again that was available to collect seeds from. And they had to collect enough seeds because then they were going to be doing hydroseeding. And this is a really cool process. And so the growing the seeds, the propagation plants, and then also growing more plants to put out in the dunes. That all required a greenhouse. So also a greenhouse was built there at Asilomar. This is actually where the seedlings for the Four-Door Dunes State Park project are currently being grown. But yeah, in the 80s, this greenhouse was built, and numerous species were grown there, including mock heather, yellow bush lupin, coyote brush, and of course, beach sagewort, one of my favorite dune stabilizers. As you can see in this nice old picture, it's got the old state parks logo on that guy's arm right there. Ice plant was sprayed with an herbicide and then left in place. The mulch of this dead ice plant material helped keep the roots of the plugs from drying out. It also helped keep the plants from being exposed to the high winds and retained moisture. So this was actually one of the first places that glyphosate was utilized in native plant restoration efforts in the United States. Another thing that was an irrigation system was actually installed as well in the dunes, which some people get a little surprised to hear about. But it seems like it's actually more common practice than maybe I had thought. So here's a nice picture where you can again see 1972 airplane view of Asilomar. There's that coastal or native plant patch up in the upper dunes. That area was again that kind of main reservoir of or source of plants for the restoration project. And then here's 2021 down below. We've got these really nice swales that are kind of filled with a dune sedge, a carex species. And then there's Monterey pines kind of making it work in the little low spots as well. So there's even standing water in some of these swales in the wintertime, and it's a really special place now that the restoration is so established. There's multiple special status species that are out in the dunes now, and the habitat also provides a lot of space for wildlife species that do not thrive in ice plant wastelands like it was before. The preserve also includes an ADA accessible boardwalk that's pretty special and critical for keeping people on a trail, and it meanders through those dunes, and we host a lot of wildflower walks there in the spring. And of course, there's ongoing land management. Ice plant, of course, is in all of our neighbors' property and gets dispersed onto our property through deer or other animal dispersal mechanisms. And then weeds like New Zealand spinach, annual grasses, wild mustard. That always keeps our volunteer crew and natural resources crew busy and active. And then those special status species do get a lot of special attention, annual monitoring, and then these little handmade chicken wire cages. We actually place those over the Menzies wallflowers because there's a really high rate of herbivory from the deer in that area. So if you've never been out to the Asilomar Dunes Natural Preserve, I definitely recommend it. I hope you'll visit soon.
All right. And so I'm going to be talking about Four-Door Dunes State Parks, which was shown in that first map there on the eastern side of the Monterey Bay. It's located approximately 13 miles north of Asilomar State Beach, an unincorporated area of Monterey County. This park contains approximately 980 acres of coastal dune habitat and 4 miles of continuous beach, as you can see in this photo. It's largely undeveloped with large coastal dunes up to 150 feet tall that offer scenic vistas of the Monterey Bay. So for decades, this property was part of the larger Fort Ord military facility, which was actively used from World War I until it was formally closed in 1994. The facility included 15 firing ranges, 2 sewage treatment plants, access roads, railroad facilities, ammunition storage bunkers, and various other structures. And this is just our portion of the property. There's the other larger Fort Ord National Monument as well that has a lot more structures as well. So in 2009, this facility was acquired by California State Parks and opened to the public for recreation. But before it's transferred to state parks, this area was obviously heavily impacted by the activities conducted by the U.S. Army, including the introduction of ice plant to stabilize the actively moving dune systems, the construction of facilities in sensitive habitats, and the deposition of hazardous materials throughout the park. So as you can see in the photo in the top right corner there, the firing ranges included trainings where the small arms were fired at targets that were spaced out and left the eastern side of our dunes as the backdrop, which led to the quick accumulation of spent ammunition, which is lead in the dune habitat. So while we continue to work closely with the Department of Toxic Substance Control to remove lead throughout the park, there are obviously still large portions of the park that are dominated by remnant infrastructure and non-native vegetation. So while State Parks is dedicated to eventually restoring all the degraded habitat within the parks and has already restored approximately 200 acres of coastal dune and scrub habitat, our current focus is a restoration site of 89 acres that is part of our Fort Ord Campground project, as you can see in this photo or schematic. This project includes the creation of 100 campsites, recreational facilities, maintenance facilities, and interpretive facilities in an approximately 130-acre area. You can kind of see, hopefully, the dashed line that marks the boundaries. So anything that doesn't have that paved area, which does include the existing ammunition storage bunkers that were installed by the U.S. Army, is included in our 89-acre site. Sorry about that. So like I said, the restoration area is intended to restore coastal dune and coastal scrub habitat that is important to our sensitive species found on site. So while many sensitive species found at Asilomar are also present at Fort Ord, such as the sandgilia and the Menzies wallflower, within the campground footprint itself, we are primarily concerned with the Monterey spineflower, Coryzanthe pungens, variety pungens, and the Smith's blue butterfly. You can see the Smith's blue butterfly on its host plant, the Eriogonum parvifolium on the left there, which is present throughout Fort Ord, and then the Monterey spineflower growing through the sand mat, the Cardianema on the right. So although the construction of the campground has not yet started, the restoration for this project is currently entering its second year, where we have been tackling the 89-acre site in phases, hoping to ramp up to 15 acres restored per year. The majority of the site is dominated by non-native ice plant, the Carpobrotus edulis, where we have continued to use the methods found to be successful at Asilomar, treating the ice plant with glyphosate and leaving the dead mat in place to continue to stabilize the dunes and protect our seedlings. We then clear small basins from the ice plant and hand water in our native dune seedlings. And while we work to strategically schedule planting areas, planting events when there's rain in the forecast, we also inevitably have to hand water in as well. So our plant palette is heavily based off of line intercept transects throughout reference sites identified by a study by Cal State Monterey Bay. This study has been highly informative and identified undisturbed habitat with intact native vegetation within Fort Ord itself and Marina State Beach, our neighbor to the north. This study also analyzed soil types, spatial patterns at reference sites, and the existing locations of special status species to prescribe vegetation alliances to help guide planting within our restoration site. So I know this diagram is a little hard to read on the left, but it's just to really show the diversity of the prescribed vegetation communities within this restoration sites. Some key ones we're working on now include Eriophyllum, Staccatifolium, Corthorogeny, and the Ericomeria ericoides. So our first phase of planting began in the winter of 2023 in a 6-acre section of the site with the majority of our planted seedlings establishing reasonably well with a 47% native cover. And we're already seeing natural recruitment of spineflower, the Monterey spineflower. We are currently working on our second phase of planting in a 15-acre section and have planted approximately 10,000 plants so far. As we move into this year, we are constantly checking and monitoring the site to ensure any non-native respouts or intrusions are dealt with quickly. And we've also been conducting annual replant surveys to track the spineflower and buckwheat populations. And we've also implemented a pilot Smith's blue butterfly program to help us gain knowledge of their presence within Fort Ord and their population size. So hopefully this has been informational, showing how Monterey District approaches dune restoration by showing an older site like Asilomar compared to our newest project. There are obviously some clear differences in the site themselves, with Asilomar being limited to a much smaller site where complete dune recontouring and hydroseeding was possible. Fort Ord obviously presents new challenges with a broad diversity in habitat types and larger acreages that make the methods used at Asilomar not as cost effective. However, the majority of the methods have proven to be successful, including our plant propagation and outplanting, such as being able to collect our native seed from the park where the planting will be occurring, propagating using our resources at the Asilomar greenhouse, and planting directly into the dead ice plant itself. we hope to continue to learn and hone our skills as we work towards restoring all degraded habitat within our parks. And just a quick acknowledgement, all of our partners who make this work possible, including our amazing state park crew members, our volunteers, the State Parks Foundation, and Cal State Monterey Bay. And I think we have some time for questions, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah, thank you for staying on time. I actually had a question to start, which was, I noticed that you're doing the four-door dunes. You're doing the restoration like prior to the campground establishment, which is probably a good thing, but having seen a lot of the coastal campgrounds, how are you planning on protecting your restoration once you have large quantities of people in the campground?
Yes, that's definitely something that if we are aware of and trying to get ahead of, but we have no climb fencing that we use throughout the park. It's around 5 feet mesh that proves pretty effective on keeping people out, but I'm sure it'll be a constant issue that we will have to address. But I think education and having people present on site who care about excuse me, our native dune species will be key.
You can't put up signs saying there's still unexploded ordnance there.
I don't think we can say that, but we do, yeah, we do have signs that clearly state that there are sensitive species present and that this is a sensitive area. So hopefully people care about that as well.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Do we have some out in the audience there? I'm not seeing anybody so far. There's a hand right there. Yeah, Ellen, are you?
Hi, great presentation. I'm just curious if you had to remove that ice plant thatch in order to get the recruitment of the spine flower.
So we do remove small basins around each of the seedlings that we plant, but we do not do anything further than that. So usually it's around a 1 foot diameter basin around each of our seedlings, and we did not need to the spine flower that we've seen that has recruited so far has been within those basins. But again, this is just our first year really seeing results from our first year of planting. So I can't say whether it will pop up through the thatch as well quite yet, but I have heard qualitatively that it has, but something we'll definitely be looking for.
Is the thatch breaking down? Or how
Yeah, it does break down, and in some of our older sites, like the Asilomar site, it has definitely broken down, but we're not at that stage yet at Fort Ord, at least, the campground project.
Okay, right there.
A quick question for Amanda. You described the first the coastal dunes as the most iconic vegetation type on the Monterey Bay. I was curious. I really kind of like that. I was curious what your second most iconic might be.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I'm really partial to Monterey pine forest. That's another one of those habitats that's at the Asilomar State Beach and Conference Grounds park unit that includes the Asilomar dunes. And I think Monterey pines, we all just kind of take them for granted, but they're globally super rare. They probably should be a listed species, and they're kind of weedy in a lot of places, actually. And we're like chopping them out. And I'm like, no, the pines, you know. So I'd say Monterey pine forest is really unique in Monterey County. I'm pretty biased, though.
And Brett, what are you going to vote for?
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
You said Maritime Chaparral.
Oh, I mean, classic.
Okay,
All the manzanitas.
For you. Okay. Maybe one, where we're at here. Yeah, maybe one more question. I saw somebody right in that, nobody else? I thought I saw another hand, but okay, over there. You with the hand up? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, well, you got to put a microphone there. Okay.
Thank you very much. Does the road at the Asilomar Dunes have much of an effect on the health of the ecosystem or its hydrology?
I might go, let's see if I can find, yeah, so like that's a very good question. And I reflect on it all the time when I'm out on the coastal trail because we're really experiencing a lot of sea level rise and erosion. There's places I've planted on the bluffs here that are now gone. Entire sections that I really, babied over years and now it's gone. And it's kind of shocking. And there have been talks actually within the city of Pacific Grove who manages this road. There's of course weird jurisdictional boundaries and gray areas along the coast anywhere you go. And so the city of Pacific Grove actually owns this road. And they even have been talking about maybe we should turn that into a recreational trail. Maybe we need to start getting rid of this hardscape because in recognition that we need to have some landward, migration of our coastline. But even, yeah, the health of the dune system, I kind of think about that as well. The sand for our dunes preserve comes from the breakdown of those rocks in the beach. I don't feel like the road is a barrier to sand crossing. It skitters right over the top on a good windy day. But I do think that could be in our future. Hopefully, I think it's really important. But yeah, that's Sunset Avenue there, this big paved road between the coast area, which has quite a few patches of dune on the coast as well as the Rocky Bluffs. So yeah, sorry, I don't remember if your question was to get rid of it or how it impacts it, but I think it does impact it.
Okay, so we're at time. Thanks again, Amanda and Nicole, for remotely, and maybe in the back you can.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.